course, I'm grateful to be here and have had the opportunity to be coming here. This is right at our 10-month anniversary that my family has been coming. Just on Wednesday nights, we have a church there. And my mom pointed out to me that our church is on the front of the bulletin. I looked at the bulletin for 15 minutes and never dawned on me there. But so grateful to had preacher ask me to if I'd be willing to come. And I'm thankful. Thankful for the church and thankful for the opportunity to preach as I normally get to do on Sunday mornings. Our church is it's not exactly in Florence. It's near Florence in Independence, but it's up that way, just the next town over. Been in the ministry, I think now for 23 years. I've been in the ministry going on the 20th year at our church, and so I know I don't look that old, but of course I'm grateful to have the opportunity. My family is out of town. My mom was able to come down with me this morning, but my wife and boys are not with us. They went out of town Saturday, and they said, you been asked one time, and that's the 1 week that we're not here. So they're hopefully watching, and I think we'll have a good service. Boy, I enjoyed the music, and just think about the Lord and those that have passed on, knowing that when if they knew the Lord, we'll see them again, and I'm grateful for that. And as much as I look forward to seeing the loved ones that I've lost, all that's going to just pale in comparison. We get to see the Lord Jesus Christ and what He's did for us, and I love to sing about Him, and I love to preach about Him. Today, though, we're going to be in the book of 1 Kings. 1 Kings, chapter number 17, is going to be primarily the text. We're going to look at just a few verses in the previous chapter to get a greater understanding of what's happened here, what's happening in the passage. At our church, I get on a sermon, and I think I could finish it. I've been on one sermon one time, 5 or 6 weeks before I finished it. Thought I could finish it in the 45 minutes. That won't be the case today. We're going to, however much we get done, we'll get done at a good time. I asked Preach when the church service was over, and he said, there is no end time, and so I like that, but we'll try to be out at the normal time if we can. 1 Kings chapter number 17. This morning, we're going to talk about Elijah. And Elijah is one of my favorite Bible characters, if you can call him that. He's a man that God used in a great way. And he comes onto the scene here in chapter 17. And I've read this story many times. It's a familiar passage. You've probably heard it preached. If you've been to church any time, probably heard this particular passage preached. And there's a lot of good thought, a lot of good truth into that. If you read the whole chapter, I think we understand the picture greater, though. Most times we just usually end the sermon, the series, there at verse number 15, but we're going to look a little further. But the Bible says in 1 Kings chapter number 17, and Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall be no dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. That's one of the first times we see Elijah. And what this is going to be like is I'm going to have a very lengthy introduction and a very short sermon. Because I'm going to read the story, I'm going to explain the story as we go along and read it, and then at the end I'm going to make one or two points, one or two statements about it, and that's going to be it. But here we find Elijah. Now the Bible said here he is Elijah, and it gives us description, the Tishbite, who was the inhabitants of Gilead. Now here he is, and the Bible tells us, he says, Elijah, I want you to go do something. I want you to say something on my behalf. I want the people to know, I want the king to know that I'm not pleased with what's going on here. And he said, I want you to go to King Ahab, and I want you to deliver a message. And that's good, right? That's a good thing that God still speaks to this man, and he was obedient to the call of God, and he was going to do what he was asked to do. And so he stands up in verse number 1, and he stands before Ahab, and he says, "Let me tell you something, king." He said, "As the Lord my God liveth," he said, "I'm going to make you a promise. And that promise is going to be one you might not want to hear." He said, "That promise is not going to be one that's going to bring joy and peace to your kingdom." He said, "In fact, this promise is going to be one that's going to bring heartache, and it's going to bring trial and tribulation to your kingdom for what you've done." And he said, "There's not going to be rain on the earth, not even any dew on the earth," he said, "until I come back and say so." And man, you think, what a man of God. He stood up and he proclaimed the truth of God, and he stood before Ahab and he said, "I'm going to make a proclamation, and God's on my side, and God's going to defend me, and God's going to be there, and everything that I know to be true about God is coming to a culmination on this moment. I stand before the king of the nation and said, I'm going to give you a message delivered from a higher king. I'm going to make it known who is really in charge here." And he said, "It's not going to rain." And then you get to verse number 2, and the Bible said, "And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying." Now here we're excited, right? Elijah's probably excited. "Man, I just told the king what's what. I just told the king what's going to happen. I just told the king he's not in charge, but God is. I just told the king it's not going to rain. It's not going to do." And he said, "Man, I'm excited about what God's going to do next." And God said, "Hold it, Elijah." In verse number 3, he said, "We have a problem." And he said, verse 3, he said, "Get thee hence, and turn thee eastward," and notice the next phrase, "and hide thyself." Now, I read that many times, and I thought, man, I don't understand. And I sort of titled this lesson, this message, misunderstandings, or what did I misunderstand? Because God, I thought you called me to stand before the king. I thought that was the promise that you told me to say, is it's not going to rain. And he said, "That's exactly what I said for you to do." Then why in verse number 3 am I not in the palace, right? Why am I not in a place of prominence now? Because I stood up as the man of God. I stood up as the one that was going to deliver the message. Why in verse 3 is it seemed like I misunderstood something? Because verse number 3 tells me I got to go and hide. Man, have you ever felt like, did I misunderstand what God asked me to do? God, it was you who asked me to stand before the king. It was you who told me that it was not going to rain, and go and tell Ahab that. And now look at what's happened. I'm hiding. And he said, "Hide thyself by the brook Cherith there, for that is before Jordan." Now you understand what we read here. I'm going to go back now just a couple of verses in chapter number 16. Let's start in verse 25. We're going to read just a few sporadic verses here to understand, why did Elijah have to go before Ahab? Now, I'm going to tell you something I misunderstood as a child for a long time. In fact, I don't even really know, when I put it together, who Ahab was. I've been in church pretty much my whole life, and been in Sunday school, and years ago, the flannelgraphs, and they would teach you and proclaim the Bible to you, and I learned all about King Ahab and his wicked wife Jezebel. I learned all about them, but I misunderstood something. Look at verse 25 of chapter 16. It says, "But Omri wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did worse than all that were before him." You say, "Josh, why are you talking about a man named Omri? What's the difference? Who cares about Omri?" Well, Omri is important, and we're going to see here in a minute. Look at verse 28. "So Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and Ahab, his son, reigned in his stead." So here we have, now if you go back and read the entire book of, chapter of 1 Kings 16, you'll find out that there was a lot of issues. There was a lot of trouble. Besides Judah and Israel being split, there was a lot of trouble between the tribes of Israel that were left there. There were a lot of issues that were going on. And finally we come to where they were having another civil war and divided themselves again. And one chose another king, and half of Israel chose Omri to be the king. And the Bible said as he led and ministered to the people of Israel, that he walked in the ways of Jeroboam, and he said, he did evil in the sight of the Lord, insomuch there was not a more evil king before him. And what a testimony, right? What a testimony to have, that there's nobody worse than you. That of all the kings, of all the lands that ever lived, there's nobody that has been bad as you were, Omri. And Omri then dies. He sleeps and goes and is buried in Samaria. And a man stands up to take his place, and his name is Ahab. And Ahab is, in fact, his son. Now, you probably know this and have known this your entire Christian life. But as I was growing up, I had no idea that Ahab was the king of God's people. I just thought Ahab was a king of a godless nation because of how wicked he was and who he decided to marry and the life that they had. It never dawned on me that Ahab was a leader of God's children. I misunderstood that along the way. And we find that as Omri died, Ahab stands up and takes his place, and then the Bible gives us a little more about him. Look at, if you would, verse number 30. Chapter 16, verse 30 says, and Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Notice this phrase, above all that were before him. Well, I thought that title was given to Dad. And it must go to show you the heritage and the lineage of Ahab. His dad became a king. Now, to become the king was something pretty important. It was a place of prominence and power and authority and recognition and respect and honor at times. And the Bible said Omri did more evil than any other king ever had done in the whole history of Israel before him. And Ahab says, well, buddy, check this out. He said, you thought Dad was bad. He said, take a look at me. He said, let me tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to take the ways of this world, and he said, I'm going to promote them like you've never seen. He said, I'm going to make them great. He said, they're going to fall after other gods. We're going to make groves and worship them, and everything I'm going to do is going to be to break Dad's record. And that's exactly what he did, even though he was the king of God's people. That's why I just never understood it. It never made sense to me. And I guess my teacher never thought to really point it out and hammer it home. This was the wickedness in God's house. This was the wickedness in God's nation. This was the wickedness among God's people. They chose him to be the king. And they said, lead us any direction you want it to go. And he said, let's go after the ways of Jeroboam. That's what we want to do. Now look at verse number 31. The Bible says this, and it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. You know what he said? Ahab said, I don't care, that's not what God wants. Who does God think he is anyway to tell me how to live? I'm the king. I'm the ruler. I'm the head. I'm the man. He said, I am from a king's lineage. I was the prince. And he said, it's my turn now to do it my way. And he said, I'm going to show God a thing or two. And the Bible said he thought it not a light thing. He said, no big deal. Let me tell you what, when God puts some weight on something, you better put weight on it too. God said it is a big deal. And it's not going to be overlooked. And it's not going to be winked at. And it's not going to be forgotten about. And it's not going to be laughed at. Why? Because you, sir, are the king of my people. They are my people, a peculiar people. They have been chosen by me, sanctified by me, set apart by me, and they have chosen you to be their leader. And he said, I am tired of your actions. And he did more evil in the sight of the Lord than any other king before him. That's the testimony. And that's why God goes to Elijah and says, you got to bring a message. He said the message is they got to know who they are and where they are. He said you got to bring a message to them, to the king, and tell them that no rain is coming. And he said there's going to be a drought in the kingdom. He said, can you do that? And he said, I will. I'll do it. God, I'll go. And he preaches and he proclaims the message of God with God on the side, and he stands back and he says, now what, God? Now what do you want me to do? Now where do you want me to witness to? Now who do you want me to correct? Now who do you want me to preach the word to? And he said, son, you better go and hide. He said, because Ahab is not going to receive that message lightly. Ahab has done more wicked and evilness than you can even imagine. And he said he's going to be looking for you, not to thank you and not to lift you up, but to take off your head and to make a mockery of you. He said he's looking to kill you. We find that out in verse number 18. He had been looking for a long time. Ahab was told of Elijah, no rain. Elijah tells Ahab, this is the word of God. He said, it's not going to rain until I say so. And God says, you better go hide. You better go hide. Now, where did he go? He said he hid himself, verse number 3 of 17, hid himself by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. And it shall be, this is God telling him why to go, that these drink of the brook, I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. He said, hold it now, hold it. Did I misunderstand? You want me to go where? Who do you want to go with me? He said, you're going to go alone. He said, you want me to do what? He said, I want you to go by the brook Cherith there. And he said, water's going to come from that babbling brook, and you're going to be sustained. But he said, God, what about food, right? He said, what am I going to eat? He said, I can't live just on water. I got to have something to eat. And God said, let me tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to tell a bird, right? Get it now. He said, I'm going to tell a bird. And he said, I've commanded that bird to bring you some bread and bring you some meat at night. He said, okay, what kind of bird? A blue jay? He said, is it a cardinal? Is it a hummingbird? Is it something? No, he said, I'm going to tell an old raven to do it. A raven? Wait a minute. Hold it. Guess what I'm going to say? Did I misunderstand you, God? You're going to have a what? Do what? He said, I'm going to have the bird bring flesh and meat to you every morning and every evening. He said, I don't understand it, but okay. And so he goes there. The first day, lo and behold, here comes the raven and drops off his meal, and it's the bread and it's the flesh. And he said, man, what a miracle. Boy, God is really intervening. God is really answering prayer. And I kind of thought, I was skeptical of it, but now I kind of believe maybe God can do this thing, and maybe that was God's plan. But you know about Cherith there, it was a hard place. It was a lonely place. It was a place for Elijah, the Tishbite. He had to learn to trust God. He had to learn to rely on the hand of God. He had to learn to rely on the bird bringing his flesh and his bread every morning and every evening. And then the unthinkable happens. Look at the next verse. Verse 7 says, oh, here it is. And it came to pass after a while, oh no, that the brook dried up. Wait a minute. Did I misunderstand God? You told me to talk to Ahab, which led me to the brook. And I told you there was no food, so you led the bird there. And that was all well and good, and I mustered up enough faith to do it. But God, what am I going to do now? He said, because as I'm seeing something happen here, he said, I'm noticing what's going on. And he said, the brook is starting to dry up. It's starting to have not as much water coming down, and I can see what's going to happen. I can see what's going to take place. And I don't know if I misunderstood. Did you tell me to come to this brook? And God said, I did. Then pray tell me, why is the brook drying up? I'm going to tell you this, that just because God called you to stand before a king someday doesn't mean you might not have to hide the next day. And just because God said, I'm going to give you a brook at Cherith, and it's going to sustain you with water every day, every time you need a cool drink, every time you need to sit down and cool off, that water will be there. He said, let me make you a promise, brother. He said, it's not going to last forever. But that didn't mean you weren't supposed to go there. And that didn't mean that you weren't supposed to be there. And that didn't mean that you weren't supposed to go to Ahab. He said, you just need to understand. You may not understand all the time that I'm asking you to do things. You may not be able to put it in your little box and make sense of it. But he said, I called you there and I sustained you there. And he said, great, now what? He said, the brook's drying up. Man, that's a scary feeling. Because that brook in your life can be anything. That brook in your life could be your marriage. And you're looking down the line and you see that brook's starting to dry a little bit. And you say, God, I don't want to misunderstand. I don't want to misunderstand this. Am I in your will? Am I doing your work? Am I serving you like I should? And God said, absolutely you are. He said, then why is the brook drying up? That brook may be a health. Maybe the health of a spouse. Maybe the service to God. It may be the health of a child. You look down, you can see the inevitable. You can see what's coming down the line. And you say, I don't understand because I did exactly what I was asked to do. I don't understand because I went to the place you told me to go. I don't understand because for so long I drank out of the brook and everything seemed fine. Why would the brook dry up now? Notice the bird didn't stop bringing the food. That was already a miracle. That was already something to pray about. That was already the unbelievable. The brook was a constant. The brook was a given, brother. The brook was what it should have been. It was running every single day. But the brook began to dry up. And you know why? The verse tells you why. Look at it there. He said the brook dried up because, now that's what's so hard to figure out. He said the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. It didn't dry up because some beaver built a dam and diverted the water. It dried up because of the prophecy that Elijah prophesied. It dried up because he did exactly what God told him to do. It dried up because God said there's no rain, and no rain came. It dried up. I don't understand. And I think this feeling of uncertainty, this feeling of misunderstanding, this feeling of I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and I'm trying and I'm trying and I go to church and I pray and I read my Bible and I give money to the church and I do all that I can to help and to serve. Why would my brook dry up now? Man, that's a hard one to get over. In fact, that's caused a lot of people to quit on God. A lot of people. How do I know? Because I've been sitting there at the end of a dry brook many times. And I said, God, I see these words. I said, it's not fair. It's just not fair. The more I try, the drier it got. I'm here because of you. I'm at Kerith because of you. And you said the brook dried up. Why? Because there was no rain. We got to hurry along here. Let's go to the next verse. The sermon's going to be short. The introduction will be long here. It said here, verse number 9. Arise. All right, here it said, look at verse number 8. And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, well, this is good. This is how it starts every time, a new phase in his life. He says, arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Now, I want you to take note of the next phrase in the Bible there. It says, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. Here's the preacher. Here's the command. Get up, go around 100 miles or so to the Mediterranean Sea, and said, get to Zarephath. And I'm going to provide somebody there to take care of you. He said, thank you, Lord. Finally, I'm going to get a home-cooked meal. Finally, I'm going to have a nice place to stay. I'm no longer at the brook, and no longer in the wilderness, and no longer alone, and no longer by myself. It's going to make sense. Who is it, God? Is it the king? Is it a well-to-do man? Is it a rich landowner? He said, no. You know who I've asked to provide for you there? A widow woman. Now, I don't know if you know much about the Bible, but usually a widow woman was in no position to sustain anyone other than themselves. In fact, they often needed assistance from the others around them. But he said, nonetheless, I've commanded a widow woman to be there and to sustain thee. verse number 10. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he was come to notice where it says, to the gate of the city. Now, make note of this. She was already at the gate. So you see, it makes sense. I couldn't understand it, but God spoke to her. God told her to be there, looking for the preacher, looking for Elijah to come in. And she's at the gate, home-cooked meal in hand, and the bed made, and the room readied. He comes to and sees the widow woman there, and he says, Lord, I didn't want to say I doubted, but I had my doubts, but here she is. She's right there. And so what does he say? He says there in verse 10, at the gate of the city, in the middle of verse 10, behold, a widow woman was there gathering of sticks. And he called to her and said, fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, verse 11, he called to her and said, excuse me, bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thine hand. He said, it's been a long journey to get here to Zarephath, and the Lord said a widow woman will be there, and right there she is at the gate, and so we know that she knows what's going on. We know that she's ready something for me to eat. So he says, will you bring me a little water? And she goes to get he said, hold it, ma'am. He said, before you do, he said, bring me a morsel of cake in your hand. He said that I am hungry. And he said, I need sustenance now. I need to be sustained. Because we know your calling. And the Bible doesn't allude to if Elijah knew why she was there gathering sticks. But she said in verse 12, one of the saddest verses that you can come across, he said, and she said, as the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel and a little oil in a cruse. Behold, I am gathering, how many sticks does it say there? 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. Now Elijah thought he was bad off, right? Elijah said, oh, it's not fair. How could God do this to me? How could God dry up my brook? Now he said, he's promised me a woman's going to be there to sustain me, and here she is. And I didn't ask for a huge thing. I asked for a little water and a little cake. And she says to me, the audacity of this woman, she says to me, I'm here gathering 2 sticks. Now, imagine, if you gathering 2 sticks, you probably aren't going to make a very big meal. She said, I don't have any food. And she said, I have just a little handful that all I need to do is heat up. She said, I just have a little oil to mix it together. And she said, we're going to make this thing. And she said, I'm going to eat some, and my son's going to eat some, and then we're going to go to the corner of the house, and we're going to lay down because we're almost to the point of death now. But she said, we're going to eat it, and we're going to die. That's my life. That's all I have left. Hold it. Now, bear with me. Did I misunderstand something? I thought God said He prepared her to sustain him. I thought that's what God told Elijah. How could God have prepared her when all she had was a little handful to make a half a cake to give to her and her son, that they could eat but just a little bit and lay down? And the thought of watching your child sit there and starve to death and can't do anything about it. And she laid there and looked at that little boy and said, what am I going to do, God? How am I going to make this? And he said, get up and go to the gate of the city. And he said, look for some sticks there. And he said, when you said, go and look for some sticks, you're going to see somebody that might help you. And she said, I don't have any other choice. And she went to find the sticks, and there, by coincidence, I don't think so, by serendipitous, I don't think so, by the divine plan of God, those two intertwine, those two meet right there. And Elijah says, I'm so thirsty and I'm so hungry. And he said, please sustain me. And she says, I would, but I can't. I can't. I don't have anything to give you. I can't be hospitable. I can't care about you. I can't worry about your need. I can't love you because I have nothing left to give. There's nothing left. I don't have anything for me, let alone my son. We're going to eat it and die. That's where she was. Oh, that's a sad place to be. Now, why was she there? She was in that place because there was a drought and no rain had come. She was in that place because everything dried up. She was in that place because there was no brook Cherith for her. She was in that place because she spent all that she had, and this was all that was left. And so we would think, okay, Elijah, the preacher, is going to understand. Elijah, the preacher, the man of God, he's going to do something that's going to be miraculous. He's going to have a fundraiser. He's going to start a GoFundMe. He's going to do whatever he can to sustain her. But that was not the call. The call was for not him to sustain her, but for her to sustain him. And so look what he says. I've looked at this verse as a preacher so many times, and it's just hard to fathom. Look at verse 13. And Elijah said unto her, fear not. Go and do as thou hast said, which was to make the cake, to put the sticks, to take the cruse of oil, to combine it to make the cake. But look what he said at the end of verse 13. But make me therefore a little cake. See the next word? First. I don't understand. Of all the things I said I didn't understand, this is one I don't understand. The preacher, of all people, who's supposed to be given to hospitality, who's supposed to be loving and caring and seeing the need of a true religion, undefiled as this, to help her. He says, before you do that, he says, go and do as you said and make this cake, but bring it to me first. And he says, then you'll go make yourself some and it'll be fine. She said, maybe this guy doesn't understand, or maybe he doesn't comprehend. I don't have anything. I don't have enough for me and my son. I don't have anything to give you. I don't have anything that's going to be left. And you're talking about bring me you one first. He said, make what you have and bring it to me first. Okay. So she did it, and she goes and she makes the cake, and she brings it to him. And you have to kind of understand what's going on here. I read it this way, because he said first. He takes the cake and he gobbles that thing down. Thank the Lord. God did say you were going to sustain me. It's all right. Make me the cake first. And he gobbles that thing down. He says, now, go make yourself one. Go make yourself one now. I can just imagine it. It's not a break it and bless it and break it to 5,000 feet. It's not one of those moments. It's not the 3,000. It's not 12 loaves of baskets of loaves left over. It is gone. It's gone, right? There's nothing left. He gobbled that thing up. And he tells to this woman who just laid down her heart to him and said, I'm going to go eat it and die. He said, go make yourself one now. And she says, I can't make myself one. There's none left. What are you talking about? There's nothing left. And he said, well, just go see. And I think as she went down there and she looked down at that pot, and I must be crazy. I know I dipped the last of that meal out, and I know I got the last drop of that oil out of that cruse. I know I did. She said, I wouldn't have thought we were going to die if there was anything left. I know that there was none left. And all of a sudden she poured it out, and there was enough to make a cake. And she poured it out, and there was enough to make a cake for her son. And you look at that and you say, hold it, did I misunderstand? I know what I had. I had so little. In fact, I had nothing left to give. And I don't know how many times as a preacher over the 20 years pastoring that I've sat there when I'm talking to somebody and I feel like the widow at Zarephath saying, I don't have anything to give you. I don't have any sound advice. I don't have any words of wisdom. I don't have any faith to pass on to you because I'm from the dry brook. I have nothing left myself. And God said, here, I'm going to sustain you so you can sustain them. But so many times, friend, I know what happens in my own faith. I misunderstand God's sustaining because I think that when God sustains me, that I'm going to have a full barrel and a full cruse. And God said, that's not always how I work. Because that kind of faith that kind of fullness doesn't lead to faith. He said each time you're going to reach your hand down in there and you're going to be shaking, you're going to be scraping, you're going to be, and he said, that's it. That's all I have left. And he said, the next time you go, he said, you're going to reach your hand down in there and there's going to be just enough and just enough. And I don't know how many times I could tell you that I felt like I was at the end of my rope. I felt like I couldn't take one more thing from God. I couldn't take one more thing from any more bad news. I couldn't take one more letter. I couldn't take one more look at that bank account. I couldn't look because there's nothing left. There's nothing there. And God said, he said, I want you to have faith. He said, don't misunderstand me. Faith does not mean that everything in your life is going to be roses and cream and rainbows and unicorns. It doesn't mean that. It means that he said this. It means sometimes you're going to have to look down and say, God, I have nothing left. And God said, I'm going to give you just what you need to get through today. He said, because he said, even in the wilderness, he said, every day I want you to go out and pick up that manna. Why? He said, you're not going to have enough to store up. And if you try to store up more than you need today, he said it's going to rot away. It's going to mold and turn to nasty. Why? He said, because I want you out here tomorrow morning. He said, I want to hear from you tomorrow. He said, I want to see you on your hands, and I want to see you thanking me for even the bread of life. He said, I want it there. He said, I want you to know that I am there and I can provide. That's why I told the raven to bring the food to Elijah. And that's why I told him that you could be sustained. And that's why I told you to gather those two sticks, because he needed you and you needed him, and you both needed me. You can't do it without God. I'm going to tell you that. I got all tangled up here. You can't do it without God. I don't care how hard you try. Friend, I don't care how much money you got in the bank. I don't care how big of a house you live in. I don't care how many cars are in your driveway. You cannot do it without God. You cannot. For without God, he said, nothing is possible. But with God, all things are possible. I have nothing left. He said, go back to the barrel. Go back to the barrel, preacher. He said, you'll find something there. You preach your heart out on a Sunday, and you go and you come back and you have nothing left, and nobody's happy, and all the things that go on, nobody's happy with you, and it's only a heartache, and you say, God, I have nothing left. And he said, open that Bible up. He said, I got you another cake right there. But you got to make it. He said, you put it together and you got to make it. And she said, okay, that's what we're going to do. And look at verse 15. And she did went according to what Elijah had said, and she and he and her house arose and did eat many days. And the barrel meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which came by Elijah. What a verse, what a chapter, what a story, what a testimony of faith. But the chapter goes on. And so many times in my life, I've heard it preached and ended right there. Oh, the promises of God fulfilled. Oh, how the barrel wasted not, neither the cruse of oil did run dry. But what about the next verse? What about what happens next? More tragic than the first. Look at it there quickly. He said here, he said, it came to pass after these things. What things? The miracles of all that just happened. After these things, that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick. And his sickness was sore, and there was no breath left in him. Did I misunderstand something? Didn't you say that we're going to have meal enough to eat and it's going to last? She goes up to the where her son was and looks at his face, and all the life is gone out of him. She says, "Oh God, no! That is not how a story is supposed to end. I already made peace with it all those many months ago when we were going to eat the last and die, but you sustained him. You gave him life. You gave him food, and now he's died. This cannot be real. It cannot be happening. What am I missing, God? What am I missing? What am I not understanding about you and about how you work? I thought that was my trial. I thought that was the test. I thought if I could prove to you that I'm going to remain faithful and give him the cake first, that you would give me what I desired and sustain me. But now look, my son has died. Oh, the tragedy. Sometimes you read that Bible and you just want to shut the pages and say, I don't understand God. I don't understand how it can be. But you and I had the benefit of what this widow woman didn't have. We can read on the next verses. We could see what was going to happen. We could see what Elijah was going to do. But this woman had no idea what was going to take place. She had no idea. So what does she do? She said unto Elijah, what have I to do with thee, O thou man of God? Ever come to call to remembrance of my sin, to remembrance, and to slay my son? She said, why did you even come here? Why did you do this to me? Why did you give me hope when I had no hope? And I was fine with that. Everything was fine. We were going to eat it and die, and that was going to be the end of it. But you gave me hope, Elijah, and you made me believe, and you gave me faith. For what? To steal it away now? Why did you do that to me? What don't I understand? What am I missing? What's going on with my faith that this is the result of that? Verse 19, and he said unto her, give me thy son. He took him out of her bosom and carried him to the loft where he abode and laid upon him his own bed. Look at verse 20. And he cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord, my God, hast thou, notice the next word, also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son. Now what's that also about? You know, there was a drought. And we like to hone in, like looking through the scope of a gun here, and we just see one particular family. We just see one widow woman. We don't see her neighbors. We don't see the other children. We don't see the other widows. We don't see anything. All we see is her. And God promised to sustain him through her, so that meant he had to sustain her. That probably means that the people around her had nothing, that they were starving to death, that probably some had already died. And Elijah looked at that and he says this. He says, why did you bring this also to her? I thought you were going to sustain her. I thought they were going to live. I thought they were going to have food. Why did you bring this evil to her also? Did I not understand what you were doing? I must have misunderstood it, because he is now died. And so he says this. He says, verse 21, and he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee that this child's soul come into him again. And I would ask you, and I would say, what in the world is he praying that for? The child has died. There's no coming back, right? It's over. That's final. And he lays over the child and he said, God, he said, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why you're doing it. But I know what you can do. Because I was at the brook and you brought the raven. I was at the brook and he said, you brought twice a day. And he said, and I left the brook and I came to Zarephath, and there was a woman there that was gathering just 2 sticks, a little fire to make a little cake, and you fed me. And he said, you've done that for many days and a long time. And he said, I don't believe that this is the end. I don't believe it, God. He said, I know that you're able to do exceeding abundantly above all I ask or think. I know that you're able, and I believe that you are able. He laid over the child. The first time he prayed, and guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. He did the second time, and guess what happened? Absolutely nothing. He did the third time, and all of a sudden, whoosh, life back into that body. Oh my! God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do. Look at what God has done. He rushes that child back down to the woman, and he puts her back in her arms, and he says this. He says, in the voice of the Lord, he took the child, verse 23, and brought him down out of the chamber, and delivered him unto his mother, and said, See, thy son liveth. He said, I had no doubts. I knew what God could do. I knew that God was able. I knew that God could sustain you because he sustained me. I knew it. But boy, if you just reverse just a couple of minutes ago when he's up there asking God, what in the world are you doing? I don't understand any of it, God. And God said, you don't have to understand it. He said, you just have to ask it. He said, you ask. And he said, you see what I can do. Not that God's going to do that every time. Not that God is bound in a box to do it. But this time, he prayed, and that life came back into that boy. And he handed him back over to his mother. And here's the end. Verse 24. And he said, and the woman said to Elijah, don't miss this verse. You mark this verse in your mind. You mark it in your Bible. You mark it anytime you say, do I misunderstand God? I don't know how God's going to do. I don't know how God's going to answer prayer. Look at right in verse 24. And the woman said unto Elijah, now by this. What? What about when you dipped that scoop into that meal? That wasn't enough. What about when you poured that cruse of oil down, shook every little drop out? That wasn't enough. And she said, no. Now by this, she said, I know that thou art what? The man of God. She didn't know the man of God that was by the brook. In fact, you know who the man by the brook was? The man by the brook was Elijah the Tishbite. That's who he was in chapter 17 and verse 1. But by chapter 17 and verse 24, he was this. He was Elijah, the man of God. I wonder, here's the sermon, here's the thought. I wonder, from verse 1 to verse 24, how many of us would have quit? I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're Ahab, bringing unrighteousness to the house of God, or you're Elijah, the man that stood before Ahab. I don't care if you're the raven bringing the food. I don't care if you identify yourself with the widow of Zarephath, the widow of Zarephath's son. I don't care if you bring yourself with Elijah in the middle of the chapter or the end of the chapter. Somewhere in this story, you're going to find a picture of your faith. And I ask you, what would it have taken from chapter 17, verse 1 to chapter 17 and verse 24 to get you to quit? Because if you had not got to verse 24, you couldn't have said what she said. Now by what? By the raising of my son. You know, it was impossible that the ravens would bring the food, but it happened. It was impossible that the 2 sticks and the little meal was going to feed him, but it happened. It was impossible that the barrel wouldn't run out, but it happened. It was impossible that the cruse wouldn't run out, but it happened. It was impossible that the child's life would come back, but it happened. It happened. So I look at this, I say, what am I missing, right? What don't I understand? And that is this. Just because you and I choose to serve God and follow God doesn't mean our path is going to be easy. But it does mean this. It means God said, I want to make you a promise. And he said, this promise is one that you can take to the bank. He said, this promise is one that you can stick in your 401k. This is a promise that you can take. And he said, you can have it a surety. He said, I'll make you a promise. He said, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will never do it. I don't understand God. He said, when you're by the brook and it dries up, I'm there. When you're at the gate, you're gathering your 2 sticks, I'm there. When you're scooping that last little bit meal out of that barrel and that last little oil out of that cruse, I'm there. He said, you didn't see me there, and you didn't see me there, and you didn't see me there, and you don't see me here. But I promise, I'm there. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Just because we serve God doesn't mean we're going to understand. It doesn't mean that we can make sense of it. It doesn't mean that we somehow know why the raven didn't eat the meat, didn't eat the bread. We don't know why. We don't know why the 2 sticks sustained the fire. We don't know why there was enough meal and oil. We don't know why. And we sure don't know why that the child was able to come back to life. I don't know why. I misunderstood the whole chapter my whole life. Until you come to this understanding, I don't have to know why. I don't have to have it figured out. In fact, the more I try to figure it out, the worse it becomes for me, because I get so upset that I don't understand how it can work, God. And God says, good that you don't understand, because if you knew that there was a widow there that just had a little bit of meal and a little bit of oil, you wouldn't have went there. You knew if the brook was going to dry up, you wouldn't have went to that brook. You knew if the child was going to die, you wouldn't have brought him to me. Except all these things led this to this one moment where you didn't know what to do, and you ran to the man of God and said, God, what can you do? And God said, I can do everything. I can bring him back to life. I can sustain a dead body. I can give life again. That's what God can do. But what does it take? It takes so many misunderstandings and still acting in faith, even when I don't understand. If I'm ever going to get to verse 24, I've got to get up even when I don't understand. I've got to give even when I don't understand. I've got to pray even when I don't understand. I've got to preach even when I don't understand. I've got to read even when I don't understand. I've got to witness even when I don't understand. Why? Because God said, I need you there, son. I need you at verse 24, because I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what this will be for you. But I know what it was for me. I know what it was. I know what it was for me. I don't know what it will be for you. I don't know. But I know it will be there. I know it will be there. Because God said, look at all the misunderstandings. Look at everything they don't know. But look at what I did. God's goodness is not based upon your service. In that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. You think, well, if I just serve God, if I just love God, if I just give to God, everything will work out. And God says, show me where you see that. He said, I'm calling you to a life, he said, that you're going to pick up your cross daily and follow me. And if you're not willing to do it, he said, don't be called my disciple. I don't know what it was or what it will be. I don't know this morning if you're even sitting in this church and you don't even know the God that I'm talking about. But I can make you one promise. Even if you don't know him, he knows you. Even if you don't know him, he has died for you. Even if you don't know him, the Bible said, for God so loved the world, that means you who don't know him. He said he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But let me tell you this, there's a lot more to being saved than just missing heaven. Being saved is, I can get to verse 24, and even though I don't understand God, I know he's my Father. And I know he's there for me. He wants what's best for me. I talked to Ty this past week, and he asked me what I was preaching about. And I said, I'm preaching about Elijah, and I'm talking about all that God can do and all that God's going to do. But he said, I told him, I said, I got thinking something the other day, last Sunday in our church in Sunday school. I said, I got up this morning and drove to our church, and there's 3 or 4 different ways to our church. We can get there from my house. It's about an hour away. And I drove, and I said, you know, when I got up this morning and got in the car, I said, I didn't have any nerves. I wasn't upset. I wasn't fidgety. I wasn't nervous. Why? I said, because I knew the way. I knew the way to church. And I said, I got on the road, and I drove, and I went the way, and I got there. I said, no problems at all. But I said, you know, there have been times in my life when I went somewhere that I didn't know the way. And used to be you had the maps, and then you had the TomToms, if you remember that, and you had the GPS, and it would always go out. You know, it would always go out in the worst spot when you didn't know how to get there. And it would go out, and you say, oh my goodness, I'm lost, we're lost. Don't get lost, don't miss a turn, don't mess up. But I said, isn't there a peace that comes by knowing the way somewhere? I got up this morning. I've been working on the building over here, some with Brother Randy and others. We've been working, and I didn't worry about getting here. I got in my car, I didn't put it on my phone, I didn't put in the GPS, didn't punch in the numbers. I just got on the road and went. Why? Because I knew the way. Thomas said, oh Lord, what are we going to do? How can you leave? He said, fear not. Why? I am the way, the truth, and the life. You know why I'm going to heaven? I know the way. I know how to get there. The way is not of my own doing. The way was not constructed by me. I just know it. I know the way. So I'm not going to sit down, oh, I'm so lost. No, I know the way. And he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. This morning, if you don't know the way, oh, what peace can come by knowing the way to heaven. Oh, what peace can come if you just know the way. He said, these things I commended unto you. He said, these things I've written unto you that believe on the name of the Son of God, that ye may know that ye have eternal life. And then he says, as it is written, God said, I'm going to write something down for you that you can know it in 1 John 5:13. And he says, as it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. All the power of God. He said, I want you to know the way, so I'm going to write it down. I'm going to give you the directions. He's the way. He's the truth. And he's the life. But he's also the way maker. He made the way. He navigated the brook. He made the way to Zarephath. He made the way to the house. He made the way to the upstairs. He made a way for life to come back. He is the way. He can help you. This morning, wherever you're at, wherever you find your faith in chapter 17, whether you don't know the way, even before you get there, there's hope. Oh, is there ever hope? This morning you might say, I guess I misunderstood salvation. I guess I thought I had to give up so much. No. You don't give up to get God. God gives you everything. He said, there's no other way but me. No man comes to the Father but by me. I don't know what you're holding on to. If you're holding on to something this morning, saying it's more valuable to you than God, I don't ask you. I say, do you not understand something? Did you misunderstand something along the line in your life to think that there's anything worth holding on to send you to hell? Today, this hour is appointed unto man to be saved. Today is a day of salvation. But if you're saved, I want you to seriously consider, where would you have stopped in this chapter and not gotten to verse 24? Not gotten to by this, I know. Let's bow our heads. Father, as we come to you now, we're grateful. Grateful to have been here. Grateful to have your word. Grateful to know that we can know that heaven is our home. And I know I'm not the pastor here, but I would ask if there's anybody here that does not know for sure that heaven is your home, that God can save you, that you have been forgiven. If you're unsure of heaven this morning, Would you just lift your hand? Anybody all in the room? Anybody at all? You would say, Josh, I know I'm saved, but somewhere along the line, I've just misunderstood God. I've misunderstood His will. I've misunderstood that He needed me to go through it so I could sustain somebody else. And I've just quit. Oh, maybe you're still here in person. Maybe you're still here in body, but you're not here in faith, and you're not here in attitude, and you're not here in spiritual life. Man, don't leave that way today, because there might be a verse 24 moment in your life that is so close to happening. But all you need to do is go forward, even in your misunderstandings, and know that God can.